This is really crude. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to completely rebuild a Hurst Competition Plus shifter. Now there's several variations of the Comp Plus shifter, as people call it, and I'm going to go over all those little variations. And I had made this tool and it's kind of crude, and I'm going to give you the plans to show you how you can 3D print your own tool. And I'm going to release these files for free, and hopefully you'll do that and have some fun rebuilding your own shifter. So thanks for watching. Hope you like this one. So what I have here is two very early Hurst Competition Plus shifters. This is a GTO shifter that was given to me in pieces. I put a little protective covering on the handle because it's in really good shape. And this is a Ford Hurst Competition Plus shifter for Mustang. I don't know exactly what particular year, but this is the Ford one. Both of these shifters have welded sticks. The stick is part of what they call the receiver. This is the receiver, this mechanism over here. And this particular receiver runs on a pivot on the early ones that pivots on nylon bushings. I don't know why they switched over, but the new one now is just simply pivoting on steel to steel. There's no bushings in here. And maybe they wanted to isolate and dampen things back then, but later on they tried to make it simple, I guess, and left it without any bushings, and it's just steel on steel. So these shifters themselves are very unique. You can't really switch parts around. The carrier, this is called the carrier, is a different length than some of the later units, and even the reverse plunger is much different. So it's a little bit different. You have to keep everything together because these particular pieces only work together as this unit. But what I'm going to do on this one, if you look at this particular body, it's drilled for stops, and this particular body isn't. So the Hurst stops work on this particular body. Same thing over here, whereas the end plate on this unit was never drilled for or threaded for stops. So I'm going to give the guy back his body, and I'm going to put a late body on here with stops so it can be used in one of my transmissions and not mess up the cams. So I always like using stops and shifters. So even though it's cool to use these and replate them, if I was going to do a restoration and the guy wanted the numbers, it'd be clean and it would get re-zinc plated. All these parts would get re-zinc plated and they would go towards the restoration. But right now, the best thing to do on this one is just ditch these pieces so I can put the later body on there and use the stops and take advantage of a stop mechanism because this guy's going to be using one of my M22W transmissions. All right, so I'm going to show you how to take apart Comp Plus shifter. I did this before in one of my other videos, but this way is a little bit different than my other video. I'm going to do it what I call a little down and dirty disassembly. So in order for you to drop the mechanism out of the body, you have to remove this brace over here. They call it a bridge. We're going to remove this bridge, get this out of the way. Now some of these cross shafts will come right off. Others you may have to tap out. I believe in my first video I showed you how to take that out, but I think this one seems pretty loose. It's probably worn. That's why it's like this. So in my first video, I had a little tool I put in here to spread this apart, but I'm going to show you how you can do it with just a few punches. Right, so here's a down and dirty way to take the body apart. Just put a punch in this particular side like this, and we're going to use another punch as a lever. the longer the punch, the better. And I can spread the case apart like this by just holding it. Get a little bit leverage on it. And all I have to do is put a screwdriver inside of it like this and pop it out. Now you could take the bottom dust shield off if you want first. Didn't really matter. There you have the welded stick, the receiver, and this is called the carrier. It's all intact in pieces here. Now in my first video, I didn't show you how to take this apart because I felt that a lot of people wouldn't have the proper tools to get it back together. So what I'm going to do is take this completely apart and show you how I get these back together again and show you what kind of tool I have for that. Alright, so I have the carrier assembly and the whole stick clamped in a vise. We got to take out these dowel pins. There's an access hole in the back of the carrier over here. But what we want to do is put a little vice grip on here just to get that thing lined up with the holes. You just want to put that on there just a little bit just to give it some tension back so you can get at the dowel pins. You want to punch them through. So now I can remove the vice grip and I can take the plunger out. I could also remove the reverse plunger. Use this up a bit. And now the rest is to take the springs out. While we're at it, might as well take out the carriage bolt. So I've got everything apart here, and we'll inspect it for wear when we clean it up. Next thing we need to do is you basically can just pull the thing apart with the springs, but be careful that nothing slides out. Takes your eye out or something, you know. So this is your reverse bias spring, your regular bias spring. This washer goes there. This is what's called your carrier. This looks in pretty good shape there. It looks a little worn here, you see this? But this is some sort of thing that they did back in the day. A lot of them are now all one piece over here. But it's got some slight wear, the carrier. But other than that, it looks in pretty good shape. We have our levers, or gates, I like to call them, because they basically are gates. And you can see the difference between these sticks now. Okay, this stick you see has a conventional receiver welded to it, and you can actually replace the receiver with a bolt-on receiver if you'd like. Whereas this other one over here, you can see the difference. It's all one piece, and the carriage bolt actually goes through this on bushings. So these are your two types of welded stick designs, basically. want you to take a look at the ends again, how they look. See? So one takes a regular bolt through it, and then this one rides on bushings, and the carriage bolt goes through for the pivoting. So when looking at the plunger, we want to look for certain wear on the plunger, something abnormal, wear over here, where it kind of goes back and forth and could possibly wear. Same thing the way the plunger actually fits into the carrier itself, how it fits this way. If it's sloppy at all, if it's got abnormal wear to it, that it can cause some slop that way. But this fits pretty good actually. Doesn't seem like it's really worn, but the edge looks a little bit scuffed, so we may just put a new plunger in and put a whole rebuild kit in this anyway. But these springs look really nice and look actually better than the springs you get today. So I'm going to reuse these springs and all these other little components here. So with this particular stick, because it's a welded stick, I'm going to change this receiver, this is what that's called, to a receiver that has a provision for a bolt-on stick. I'm not really going to use this particular Ford stick, but I'm going to use the shifter in another application. So as you can see, it's really easy to take apart a Hurst Competition Plus shifter. It's not that hard at all. The biggest challenge, of course, is getting it back together and getting those springs and those washers loaded inside the receiver and placed inside the carrier without taking an eye out or having the springs shoot clear across the room and lose everything. Now, my first video I didn't show you how to do that is because simply my old tool that I have, I really didn't think it was a good thing to show people, number one, because you're not going to go make this, you're not going to have a welder maybe in your shop, or you're not going to have the ability to do something like this. Now, my friend Eric Davidson, I'm going to give you some links to his channel below, and he shows you how he takes one apart and puts it together using some tools he made, which I think anybody can do. But what I'm going to do now is going to go to my 3D workstation, and I'm going to go create a 3D file for the tool that I use. And I'm going to give you links below also for that file. So if you want to actually go high tech and 3D print your own assembly tool, well, you can do that now. So let me go to the server, get the file, and then in 3 days, we should be able to get the finished part back. And we'll try it out and put this thing back together. Thanks. Okay, so what I got here is this fixture, and it's going to be 2 files with 2 different parts. And the carrier is going to fit into these little tiny location grooves over here. And the receiver is going to be on the top. I'm going to leave some holes there that can be tapped later on for bolts. So basically these 2 pieces are going to slide together like this. And the reason why I have these little supports there is to keep it kind of square and locked together. Okay, I've uploaded the files to GrabCAD, and if you can see here, you got the 2 parts. This is going to be the backing plate and then what I call the press plate. They're in an STL file format. I will give you the link below, so they're ready to go. Here they are, and they're yours. Hard at work. I see. Did that 3D Hubs package come in? Anything from 3D Hubs?
Yeah, well, at least I'm here.
Thanks. Smart ass. That's the backing plate. Looks just like the drawing. That's the other piece here. Wow. It's so wild to be able to do things just as you envision them, you know? So what I have to do is tap out these pilot holes I made. I'm going to do a 3/8 thread here and a 7/16 thread course over here on this side. So 3/8 and 7/16, and then I'm going to actually do clearance holes on this particular plate side over here. So I'm really happy with the way this turned out. And by the way, I'm using a compound which is it's a nylon carbon fiber filled material called Onyx. It's very durable but flexible. Now I don't know how well this is going to last. clamping it in a vise. The idea of this thing was to do a prototype. Maybe I'd make one out of steel later on or aluminum, but I was just curious to see if the concept worked, and I didn't want to go through all the trouble of making a part that didn't fit. So it's better to just do a 3D print so you can see how it works out, but I'm really shocked that it held the tolerances. I mean, I've got tolerances here within a few thousandths, and this thing just snaps in perfectly. So it's going to be an awesome tool. I think it's going to work really well. I use this company 3D Hubs, and as it says here, it lives up to its name, custom parts for engineers worldwide. They're a great company. I've used them before on a number of things, and my turnaround time was within 4 days, so it's great. So what you want to do is you want to take a flexible putty knife, because the washer for the reverse bias is very thin, and you need something to kind of guide the washer into place as we put everything in one shot. And looks like this will do the trick. Right, so on the press plate, I made a 7/16 clearance hole for this bolt and a 3/8 clearance hole for this bolt. All right, they can be any length you want, because these bolts are really just only to guide the springs in place. I'll show you how this all fits together in a second here. And I tapped this 7/16 course and this 3/8 course. So the fixture is going to go together like this. Okay, so this is what the assembly tool looks like all together. And if you notice, I got some bolts that are pretty long. Again, this is a 3/8 bolt coarse thread, 7/16 bolt coarse thread. The reason why I have these bolts long like this is because I want to be able to remove them when the fixture is in a bench vise. And a lot of times if the bolt is too short and you make a bolt over here, you may not be able to get it because the bench vise might be in the way. So this way you can easily remove the bolts. These bolts again are here only to hold the mechanism springs in place. Once it's clamped together, we remove the bolts and then slide the whole assembly together. So Hurst shifters have different receiver mechanisms. So if you need to change the offset of your stick, it's possible that you can buy a different receiver to put the stick in a different position for whatever application you're doing. This is common on most shifters. It's pretty much straight up to the side of the shifter, where this particular receiver will bend the stick over towards the center line of the transmission more. There's also receivers that bring the shifter forward and off to the center, and some that have more offsets to the side and less offsets to the side. So there's a few different types of receivers available. In case you need to change one or swap one out, they are available. So in order to rebuild your shifter, you're going to need a Hurst Competition Plus 4-speed shifter rebuild kit. I manufacture these kits with parts I purchased directly from Hurst. I've got several packets inside the kit. This particular packet has all the bias springs, your main bias spring, your reverse bias spring, reverse plunger, and the washer. This packet has what I kind of call all the outer components: the dust shield, alignment pin, stop bolts, and the main pivot pin. The carriage bolt is in this one. It's got your bridge, carriage bolt, nut, and washers. All your 3 shim plates are in this kit. The wave spring, 15 thousandths plate and 30 thousandths plate, and your main selector plunger with 2 new pins. These plungers are really nice. Looks like they're made out of stainless steel and polished. So using all these components, providing you check all the other components that are in your shifter housing, like the carrier and all the other components that fit together for wear, you should have a nice shifter when everything is done. So let's start putting this together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some EP grease. This is a grease I use from Driven. It's got extreme pressure properties. I'm going to grease the inside of the carrier. The reason why I like using this also is because it doesn't wash out with water. Just grease the carrier really well on both sides. and just snap it into the fixture like this. Lay it down. So now what we're going to do is lay the springs on top of this and just put some grease on the springs as well. Just a little bit. Kind of hold them in place. Lay the washer on top of this spring. So I'm using the grease to kind of keep the washer on the spring and the spring in place. Do the same thing for this spring. Lay it on it like this. Okay, I made this a little closer. Hopefully you can see the way I got the spring in the washer kind of held in place with grease and the bias spring held in place with grease. Now we're going to lay the receiver on top of this, just like this. And then the press plate on top of that. Hold it in place. So these bolts will keep the springs from falling out. All right, so I'm going to put the fixture in the vise. That's why I like these long bolts, as you can see, because they kind of help guide it in place. And just gradually bring it in, make sure everything is seated properly as I want. And it's only going to clamp in to the width of the carrier. Can't go any more. Take out these bolts. My hands are a little greasy. Put the little paper towel on there to take them off. Okay. I'm going to take this 3/8 square piece of material. You can actually find this material in Home Depot. Going to place that here. Going to place that putty knife right in there on the washer. I'm going to have my fingers here holding that piece of 3/8 down. That's going to keep that spring from popping up. And I'm going to just push down. Now you can walk it down. That's it. So when you press this in, the washer isn't necessarily going to be lined up exactly with the hole, and you may have to just kind of get it situated better where you need it to be. It's got to kind of be in center of the hole, like this. You can actually put your bolt in there too. Same thing with this spring. You may want to just make sure that it's pushed back where it needs to go. There you go. It took less than 30 seconds to put this together. So I'm going to take the bevel washer with the high side facing down and I slide it into place, and then I'm just going to push this down a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to use 2 screwdrivers to line things up. We're going to use a small, you can use anything, a Phillips head punch or whatever, just to get in here, and so you keep the bevel washer from not dropping out. And then we're going to use another screwdriver to kind of pry this down this way so we can get the carriage bolt in here. That's the idea. So we get a nice clean shot getting everything through. See? Like this. So again, I got this screwdriver prying this way and this other screwdriver lining up the position for the carriage bolt. So I don't know if it's hard to see, but the spring here can interfere with getting the carriage bolt in, so you kind of have to push the spring down a little bit before you can get the carriage bolt in all the way. Then you can pull everything apart and push the spring back. It's very close to the bolt. And just rotate the bolt till the square lines up correctly. we go. So in order to make life a little bit easier, you want to install the bridge plate so you can kind of center the receiver. You don't want to bend these bridges. You want to just have them so that they pretty much are flush and straight. I'm installing the reverse plunger. And what I usually do is I'll put something in here that's a little bit thicker just to hold it in place. So I could just drive the pins in now. Now a few things about pins. This is going to be pivoting on these pins. So try to punch your pins in, even the factory doesn't do this, with the seams away. In other words, these seams of the pins, because it's a split pin, punch them in so that they're away from the receiver, okay? Like this, about 180 degrees away from the receiver. Let's just start it. That looks good. Same thing, I want to have that split seam 180 degrees away from the receiver. So before you put any of these shifters together, this particular shifter body looks like it was pretty banged up. There's areas here where it looks like maybe wrenches, they hit against it and it makes some rough edges. And these little dings and dents can prevent the whole assembly from going together easy. So what you want to do is, if you can, pass a file over this, clean these edges up, or use a Dremel tool and bevel all these edges and make them nice and clean so that you can insert everything nice and smooth again. You can see right over here, looks like there might have been wrenches banging against this at one time. All right, so I'm getting ready for the final assembly of this shifter. So we got this whole mechanism all done, ready to go. Now, the reverse gate on this one was for a Ford or Corvette. That's what they use on some of the early Vets and the Ford top loaders. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the reverse gate with a straight down gate, which is more common in a lot of older units. So that's basically, I'm going to ditch this one and I'm going to put this gate in, and that's going to work great for a lot of other applications that I have. So it's something you could do when you can mix and match parts and really build any shifter you want if you know the basics. So hopefully this will help you. So before I do the final assembly, I remove this bridge plate and nut. I leave the bolt in place and the washer. I'm just doing it to make it easier to assemble the whole thing into the shifter body. So it's very important to take this plate back off again. So I greased everything up with the EPG grease, and I'm putting down the 15,000 shim plate, the reverse gate, the 30,000 shim plate, the 1-2 gate, and the 3-4 gate. I got this coated nice and good. And the anti-rattle 15,000 plate. So you can see I just cleaned up these edges a bit, so it'll make inserting the whole mechanism a lot easier. So I'm going to just grease the inside of this case. Now a lot of times it's easier to start assembling this without this shim plate first. Just get it going and then slide it in. But it's up to you. I cut myself. And you just want to start lining everything up, getting it in place. once you can start the cross shaft, you want to just start lining things up till it seats in. So I've got it facing down. I push all the shim plates in place. Then we want to put in the backing plate here. And again, you don't want to bend the bridge plate, you just want it so that it's flush against the whole carrier, but you don't want to have it bend into the carrier at all. You just want to have it so that it's flush. It's pretty straightforward. There's a tab that fits into the body on the bottom, and you can use a screwdriver to kind of pry it into the back plate. So to finish things off, I'm going to put in the stop bolts. These come in the kit. I'm really happy about the way this turned out. And one of the things, again, is to show you that you have options with rebuilding the shifters. So a lot of times, like you can get cores, like I picked this up as a Mustang core, and I was able to convert it into using it for a lot of GM applications, like for the 55 Chevy, the Chevelle, the Nova. It's a much more common piece. So here we have the whole shifter body completely rebuilt and ready to install. I've included an alignment pin and all the hardware necessary to bolt a new chrome handle to it. It's all ready to go. I think it came out pretty good. Let me know what you think. So everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. Please leave some comments below. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Now, this is part one, and part two, which should come out in a few days after this video is released, I'm going to go into detail on how I rebuilt that 1966 GTO shifter. It's a little bit different, but I think with the two shifter videos, you should get a real good handle on how to rebuild these shifters. Now, in regards to the tool, this tool here, the links below are on where you can get the files to 3D print your own tool. I would really appreciate that if you do it and make any improvements to the tool, because I think that would be really cool if we can all somehow share our improvements to this tool. I think it's a good idea, something that we can do in this day and age. You can maybe post these images on Facebook or Instagram and hashtag it as Hurst Tool. So hashtag Hurst Tool. And perhaps we can all learn a bit from one another with some of the mods and tricks that we've done to it. And let's have fun, okay? So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for part two in a few days.